Hi, I'm Marty Nemko, and I'm really glad you're here for the very first edition of How to Do Life here at KSFP. I really normally don't want to bore you, but I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the generous support of the California Endowment. Thank you. The Reva and David Logan Foundation. Thank you. The James Irvine Foundation. Thank you. The San Francisco Foundation. Thank you. And Craig Newmark Philanthropies. You know the guy who started Craigslist? Thank you all. I will try to do you proud. My job here, my pleasure here actually, on this show is going to be to try to give you practical advice to improve your life while hopefully not being too boring. My topic today is going to be how to improve your thinking. Unless you can think well, everything else is going to be much harder. So I'm going to focus on how to improve your thinking. But first, I think you probably need to know a little about me if you don't know me already, which is probably the case. In any case, but rather than bragging, I'm going to tell you about my failures, because there often are more lessons in failures and they're less often discussed. So let me tell you chronologically kind of what my failures have been. First, when I was a kid, I tried really hard to be liked. I would even give presents to kids. But I didn't realize that unlike what my parents wanted, they wanted to show me off and whatever, that bragging was going to make people beat me up. And while I was verbally able, I was physically a wimp. And so kids beat the hell out of me. And that was an early lesson, the first mistake. I better learn to not be a bragger. If anything, err on the side of being modest. The next big screw up I made was, let's see, I think I want to talk, right after I graduated college, I was fortunate enough, God knows why they chose me, to be a manager of a drug education program. And I was called the boss. And so I thought my job was to boss people around. I got fired very quickly. Even back then, the key to success is much more collaborative management. Yeah, be tough where you have to, but generally default to collaboration. So there was that. Then the next thing that comes to mind is I was this new professor, temporary professor at UC Davis, and the head of the department was showing me around. And somehow in the course of the conversation, I said, I really like New Yorkers because they're real straight shooters. Well, I found out later that he, who was from the Midwest, was very offended by that, and that he valued the tact of the Midwesterner. Guess who wasn't rehired? Right. Okay, another mistake. Next one comes to mind is I was a columnist at The Atlantic, and my editor asked me to write a column about who has it better net, men or women. And like a fool, I said, yes, sir. And I wrote a column that argued that I think that net, women have it better. That, in fact, women have more choices. It's much easier for them to be a full-time worker, part-time worker, stay-at-home mom than a guy. If he's a stay-at-home husband, he's often viewed askance. And the 82 cents on the dollar statistic, when you really parse down, when you compare apples with apples, in other words, pediatricians who work true full-time with pediatricians who work true full-time, women make roughly the same as men. So I wrote it, he liked it, he published it, and then the women's organizations pounded away at him until he was forced to fire me. Other mistakes. Well, I think I'll stop there. Let's turn now to you, because that's what this show is really about. It's about trying to help you in realistic, doable ways improve your work life. And as I said, the topic for today is going to be about improving your thinking, your problem-solving skills, because without that, all the advice I can give you about career, about relationships, about money, about improving your health are going to be a lot harder. So here are some of my thoughts that are doables, don't require any personality transplant. First, and maybe easiest, slow down. We tend to want closure, so we tend to rush and try to get an answer, but sometimes just a deep breath and maybe a 1-second pause can help you think better and come up with a better solution, because I don't know if you know that, I didn't know this until I was preparing for the show, your neurons fire 100 to 200 times every minute. So you're with 1 second, in 1 second, 100 to 200 times every second. So you give yourself just a 1-second breath. Your neurons are working overtime to try to help you come up with a better solution. Another way to improve your thinking skills is to, as possible, as long as you don't have a choice, choose moderately challenging tasks. So, think like Goldilocks. The tasks should be, if you can, find hard that are not really easy. If you want to improve your thinking skills, sometimes we just want to do stuff that's easy. But something that's not too easy, not too hard, just right. That's going to engage your brain at a level in which you can learn. If it's too easy, you learn nothing. And if it's too hard, you can't engage with it. So if somebody told me to solve an astrophysics problem, I wouldn't gain a damn thing. So try moderately difficult tasks. You'll more likely grow from it. Similarly, you want to read and watch stuff that's going to require moderately better thinking than you have. So what publications, TV shows, books, YouTubes, and podcasts do you enjoy, but that require your full attention? Focus more on those. Your thinking skills probably get better. Again, a related idea, spend time around moderately better thinkers. Have you ever been to some lecture or discussion that completely went over your head? Well, you can't grow from that. Conversely, you're not going to upgrade your thinking ability by watching Looney Tunes. So spend time with people whose thinking ability you respect and whom with a bit of effort you can understand. Take the right class. If you're a lot of people like to structure their learning. They also personally enjoy being part of a class, even just for the social stuff. Take a course on critical thinking, rhetoric, or communication. And this is kind of an odd belief, but I believe that whether it's online or in person, first consider short courses. That's because many instructors have what I call an early point of diminishing returns. If an instructor has very little time, they intend to include only their best stuff. And the longer the course, the greater potential they have for padding. I want to mention a few here that are particularly on target for improving thinking skills. There's a 1-hour LinkedIn learning course called Critical Thinking, and it's been taken by 325,000 people. And it's free for a month, and that includes unlimited access to all of LinkedIn Learning's thousands of courses. Another course that I want to bring to your attention is something called Master Cognitive Biases and Improve Your Critical Thinking. It's a 4-hour course, has an average rating of 4.4 out of 5. It's a Udemy course, and those tend to be practical and well organized. It's $94 regular price, but they often discount it, really, sometimes down to like $10. And the third course I want to mention, online. These are online. It's not great for social, but it's going to be great for convenience, so you don't have to schlep in traffic or wait for mass transit. Anyway, Mindware. It's free. 12-hour course on critical thinking, and it's offered by the University of Michigan, and it has a 4.7 average review. Just Google Mindware and University of Michigan, you'll find it. Now, this is not mainstream, but I believe it makes sense, and it certainly worked for me and some of my clients. I've noticed that I seem better able to solve problems when I'm in the shower, after I've had a cup of coffee, or while I'm walking rather than sitting. And the common denominator is that they all increase oxygenation to the brain. It makes sense to me. It's well established that people with poor circulation have reduced brain oxygenation, and so they have less cognitive function. So could increasing circulation, if you have a normal circulation, could that also improve brain power? Well, it turns out that there's research to support that. A University of Illinois study found that walking improves your recall, which of course is core to problem solving difficult problems. But I'll stop there about that. There have been other studies too, but I want to pass on those. The shower, I mentioned taking a shower. I think I get my best ideas in the shower. And that may, be partly increased oxygenation, but MIT neuroscience PhD Alice Flaherty says that it derives also from being relaxed, which releases dopamine. Whatever the cause, you might, when it's possible, try saving a difficult problem for the shower. Okay. Caffeine. There was a study by Duke researchers that found that caffeine improves brain function. So some people are different, and maybe it doesn't have, everybody's a little different. We're going to learn that precision medicine means that one drug isn't going to work for one, work for another. But I find that coffee improves my thinking ability. It doesn't make me jittery. So try a little coffee, or, tea. Black tea has roughly a third of the amount of caffeine as a cup of coffee. And of course, those energy drinks have a lot. I think more than an average cup of coffee. Another easy, you notice I'm focusing here on doables. Another way to improve your thinking is to close your eyes. There was a study done by the University of Surrey that found that we remember better when we close our eyes. The study found that crime eyewitnesses who, when interviewed, closed their eyes, remember more what they saw. I think that's true too. I found that true. And finally, and this seems most absurd, but when you think about it, it makes sense. There was a review of the literature in Psychology Today that found that chewing gum increases memory and concentration. And again, maybe because it improves your oxygenation in the brain. And a St. Lawrence University study found that chewing gum for 5 minutes improves your memory and speed of cognitive processing for 15 to 20 minutes. So every time I've got something that I really want to think about, I'll often stick a piece of gum. I tend to like to use Trident gum because it doesn't use saccharin or any other of the dangerous chemicals. Xylitol apparently is the chemical. Lousy name, sounds really dangerous, but apparently it's a lot safer. I will throw a piece of Trident in my mouth, Trident Spearmint or Trident Original, those are my two favorite flavors, for 5 minutes as I'm thinking, and that can often be helpful. Now, and again, this is kind of a weirder, kind of a novel approach. I guess before I go to this, I want to share some words that help you think better. Literally words that you use that help you think better. But I want to let you know, for those of you who are just joining us, I am Marty Nemko. This is the Virgin edition, the first edition of How to Do Life here on KSFP, and brought to you by not some crappy product, but by the likes of the Irvine Foundation and the San Francisco Foundation and the Craig Newmark Foundation of Craigslist and the California Endowment. So got some heavy hitters behind that. I have a lot to live up to. So here are some words or phrases that help you think better. Thought experiment. When I'm trying out an idea, I like to create a thought experiment. Here's an example. Imagine there were two clones of you. One chose to be a writer, the other a business person. On their deathbed, which clone do you think would feel better about the life they lived? Another example. Imagine there are two Earths. In one, hiring, promotion, and college admission was based purely on the merits. In the other in the other Earth, decisions compensated for past injustices to certain subgroups. Which Earth do you think would end up having a happier and more successful populace? So thought experiment. It's a nice thing to word to use and a concept to it. It'll help you think better, maybe. Probabilistic is another term I love to use that I think improves critical thinking. Crucial, if you're being a good thinker, is to make probabilistic assessments of alternatives. For example, the realistic best case scenario is X. For these reasons, I assess the probability of that occurring as 30%. The realistic middle outcome is Y. For these reasons, and I would mention those, I assess its probability of occurrence at 60%. And the realistic worst case outcome is Z. And I would say for these reasons, I assess the probability of it occurring at 10%. Thinking probabilistically really adds a lot of nuance to your thinking and improves your thinking skills. Another phrase and concept that helps improve my thinking skills and may help yours is opportunity cost. Along with probabilistic thinking, considering opportunity cost may be thinking's most important component. For example, before the college invests in a new building, we should consider the opportunity cost. In other words, what the college could otherwise do with the money. Another example, instead of remodeling the kitchen and the bathroom, we could spend just a bit to freshen those and use the rest of the money to add a room. Opportunity cost. Another term and concept that improves many people's thinking skills. I like this one. Reasonably derived. I use that term when I say sentences like, all wisdom does not reside either left of center. The best solution, either left or right of center. The best solutions generally require considering reasonably derived ideas from across the ideological spectrum. The use of that term, reasonably derived, is a concise way to exclude unreasonable ideas. Okay. Another term I like is fair-minded. I use that term to encourage statesman-like rather than ideologue-like thinking. It also adds gravitas to my position. So, for example, I'll say, a fair-minded analysis would raise taxes further on tobacco, but lower taxes on basic household items. Fair-minded, like the term, I think it helps critical thinking skills. I love the word wise. I use that so often in my writing. It's another word that invokes a reflective rather than visceral reaction, as well as add gravitas to what I'm saying. So, for example, the dictum to never give unasked for advice may be too black and white. The wise person recognizes when the rule should be broken. Another one I like is sphere of influence. Few of us can change the world, but we can all affect our sphere of influence. Use that term, sphere of influence, to encourage a wide range of your audience, from unemployed clerks to CEOs, to attempt to influence change outside of themselves. Another term I like is foundational or core to. Usually they're explicit or implicit first principles that undergird every person in policy. The term foundational or core to concisely expresses that. For example, foundational to the use of ability group classes is the belief that both low and high ability kids will do best in classes with students of similar ability. Foundational. I like it. Hope you do too. Axiomatic. That term describes a point that needn't be explained. Like, it's axiomatic that in corporate America it's unacceptable to express anger more than rarely. Axiomatic. Continuum. That's a really important one for improving thinking skills. That term discourages black and white thinking, adds nuance. Most of the really good thinking often occurs in the gray areas. Most factors exist on a continuum. For example, where would you fall on the continuum from finding it easy to cold call versus being terrified of it? And what could make you move a bit toward the easy side? Continuum creates nuance. I like the term cherry pick. That is, the term means using examples that aren't very representative to make a point. So, for example, if a client says to me, "Oh, my coworker was late and he didn't get in trouble, yet when I got written up." Well, cherry picking militates against solid decision making, so I'm often going to call that out. I like the phrase index of. Use the term index of when you want to describe a simpler way to assess a complicated factor or trait. For example, a person's vocabulary is an index of his overall intelligence. Just 3 more. I think that's more than enough. A priori. Of course, that's a Latin word originally, but it's used in English. An a priori means, or a priori, depending on how you pronounce it, it's a contention that you make without relying on any future data. For example, a priori, my guess is that community objections are going to delay the project for 6 months. And as we get into the project, I may revise that estimate. So, a priori, it's like up front. Again, it's I don't know, I guess it will improve your thinking skills a bit, but certainly sounds pretentious. I like the term dispositive. Dispositive means an argument that gets made that trumps all other arguments. For example, in deciding whether to continue the pilot program, the improvement in student scores will be dispositive. And finally, I use this constantly. Actually, it was the name of my column when I was a columnist at the Chronicle. It was called Under the Radar, or Under Discussed, which is a synonym. Under Discussed, Under the Radar. I like both terms. They're good for enhancing thinking skills. There's so much content available out there on the net, on podcasts, for example. I prioritize talking and writing about ideas that are important, but under the radar, under discussed. Okay? Enough of those. Now I want to end today's first edition of How to Do Life here on KSFP with a little, to make it more interactive with you, for you. I want you to do a little self-assessment. I'm going to ask you a few questions to help you think about how broad a thinker you are. Because thinking broadly, not truncating all ideas that are left of center or right of center, it's key to becoming a better thinker. So, first question. How often do you vote for a candidate from just one party? All the time? Most of the time? Or it varies a lot? A second question. How often have you changed your mind significantly about a foundational issue? For example, affirmative action, climate change, marijuana legalization, illegal immigration, whether the gender and race pay gap is caused mainly by sexism and racism or by other factors. How often have you changed your mind significantly about a foundational issue? Often, sometimes, or rarely? Third question. By the way, there's only 4 questions. Third question. On issues like the ones I just talked about, when a person you respect or a media outlet argues for an opposing side, how likely are you to listen with an open mind, willing to consider changing your position? Usually, sometimes, or rarely. And the fourth and final self-assessment question about whether you're allowing your thinking to include the full marketplace of ideas, the full continuum of responsibly held ideas. On those issues, when a person you respect or a media outlet argues for an opposite side, how likely are you to respect them as much or even more despite your disagreement? Usually, sometimes, rarely. Some people argue that open-mindedness just isn't that important, maybe even believe it's better to stand firm, no flip-flopping about core principles you believe. Yet there is merit in the time-honored proposition that wisdom does reside across the ideological spectrum. I've ended every radio program. I was on KELW for 30 years, and I ended every radio program. It's an NPR station in San Francisco. I've ended every radio program with, "We find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't." Okay. Now, but very often people have difficulty finding or don't, and they understandably don't make the effort to seek out ideas across the ideological spectrum. It's so much more comforting, as I said, to find stuff that believes with you. So I'm going to share some sources from the left and some sources from the right, and you may want to at least do some consulting of one or more sources, especially on an important issue you care about, at a media outlet that operates from the opposite side of the spectrum. Credible sources on the left include the New York Times, The Economist, used to be more centrist, but it's now self-avowed as being more liberal, The Atlantic, and The New Yorker, plus books that are published by Random House, Simon & Schuster, Hachette, and Harper, plus most movies that are highly reviewed, like score 80 or more on Metacritic. From the right, consider checking out the National Review, American Thinker, Commentary, Reason, which is libertarian, or books published by Regnery, Threshold, Crown Forum, Penguin Sentinel, or Encounter, and the articles of Victor Davis Hanson, the late Charles Krauthammer, Heather McDonald, Michelle Malkin, Christina Hoff Sommers, Thomas Sowell, and Walter Williams. And finally, as a final tip for improving your thinking skills, it's a useful tool. I use it with my career counseling clients all the time. Invoke your wiser twin. When you're stuck, try saying aloud what your wiser twin would do in the situation. Actually, we have a few more minutes, so I want to talk about some less useful approaches to improving your thinking skills that are debunked, and I think you'd be well advised to, let's just say, think twice before adopting those as in legitimate hope that you're going to improve your thinking skills. For example, and most obvious, a couple of decades ago, it was believed that listening to Mozart is going to raise your IQ. Well, while it's certainly pleasurable to listen to Mozart, the connection with IQ has long been debunked. Similarly, a few years ago, and it's a little more recent even, exercises that were marketed as brain training were touted as ways to boost your intelligence. but independent researchers, in other words, not the people who started the movement, they failed to verify the originator's claims. For example, Lumosity was big. It was the maker of these so-called brain training games. It was fined $50 million by the Federal Trade Commission, which alleged deceptive advertising. There are other pop psych, I call them pop psych nostrums, for improving thinking skills. They come and go. To this day, there are some of them. There are these gurus that are they're really great at selling and at storytelling, and they insist you can get much better at thinking if only you follow their simple plan. For example, think positive, raise your expectations, reframe, have grit, a growth mindset, power pose, be fabulous. Unfortunately, both logically and empirically, those nostrums are longer on their appeal than they are on real-world significant benefit. Really, many scientists dismiss those gurus' basis for their sureness because their basis is mainly anecdote or not randomized studies that the concept creator conducted. And as I said, doesn't get replicated well, by independent researchers. I mean, it doesn't they try to replicate it, but they're unable to replicate the positive findings. And the reviews of the literature by researchers other than the concept creator have been disappointing. I'll just give you a few examples. Psychology Today published something called Grit. Is it baloney? By Ravi Chandra, an MD. A research team at Michigan State University found, quote, the popular growth mindset interventions aren't very effective, end quote. A review of the literature in the New Yorker was called The Powerlessness of Positive Thinking. A Scientific American article is entitled, Is Meditation Overrated? And a special issue, a whole issue, in this journal called Comprehensive Results in Social Psychology, reviewed the independent data on power poses. Remember that when they said if you just stand straight and chin up or whatever, you're going to be more confident and your thinking will be better. Well, that review of the literature is notable in that the writers all had supported the concept, but every one of them now has deep reservations. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you what has worked and not worked over my decades of experience and reviews of literature, all frankly through the lens of a Berkeley PhD, and my degree specialized in the evaluation of innovation. It does make me want to throw cold water on some of those gurus that have gotten rich preying on the gullible, or who may have gotten rich preying on the gullible. I haven't seen their bank account. But let's end on a positive note. Let me just reiterate the fewer things I thought about. Slow down can improve your thinking. Choose moderately challenging tasks. Read and watch what requires moderately better thinking than yours. Spend time around moderately better thinkers. Perhaps take a class online or in person on critical thinking. Think about building your oxygenation by thinking when you have to do hard thinking, by doing it while you're walking or showering or drinking tea or coffee, closing your eyes, and even chewing gum. And use some of those concepts and words that help you think better, like thought experiment, probabilistic, opportunity cost, reasonably derived, fair-minded, and wise. So, with that, I want to thank you very much for watching. I hope to be of greater help to you in further shows. My next show, I'm planning to talk about how to improve your self-awareness, how to be a better judge of who you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and so it's easier for you to make a plan for self-improvement. And in any event, I will end this show, as I've ended all my previous shows, by inviting you to consider that we find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't. I'm Marty Nemko.